How to Read a Book by Mortimer J. Adler and Van Doren. Picture this. You're sitting comfortably with a book in your hands, eyes scanning line after line, page after page. 10 minutes pass. Then you suddenly snap back to awareness and realize something disturbing. You have absolutely no idea what you just read. Your eyes did the work, but your mind was off wandering somewhere else entirely. Sound familiar? Or maybe you've had this experience. You finally crack open one of those intimidating classics everyone insists you should read. You know, the ones that are supposed to change your life, but as you wade through the pages, it feels less like enlightenment and more like trudging through mud. The words are definitely English, but somehow they refuse to connect into anything meaningful. You start wondering if maybe you're just not smart enough for this book. Here's the good news. If you've ever felt this way, you're actually standing right at the threshold of a revelation that most people never stumble upon. Ready for it? Real reading, the kind that actually matters, isn't something that just happens to you while your eyes drift across a page. It's a skill, like playing the piano or speaking French. And just like those skills, it can be learned, practiced, and eventually mastered. Tonight we're diving into a book that's less of a guide and more of a skeleton key to unlock the world's greatest ideas. First published back in 1940 and polished to perfection over the decades since, How to Read a Book by Mortimer J. Adler and Van Doren has quietly become a phenomenon. It's taught millions of people how to transform reading from something you have to do into something genuinely thrilling, a real conversation across time and space. Adler was a fascinating character, a philosopher and educator who spent his entire career grappling with the biggest ideas in Western thought. But here's what made him different. He was absolutely convinced that these ideas weren't meant to gather dust in university libraries. They belonged to everyone. The catch? You needed the right tools to access them. This book is your toolbox. It's based on a simple but radical promise. The greatest works of history, philosophy, and science aren't locked away from you behind some invisible barrier of genius. They're sitting there, waiting patiently for you to learn how to turn the key. By the time we finish our journey tonight, you'll understand the framework that makes this possible. You'll learn about 4 distinct levels of reading, climbing from basic comprehension all the way up to true mastery. This isn't about speed reading your way through more books. It's about reading so deeply that the right books actually change who you are. Let's start with a brilliant analogy the authors share right up front. Most people think of reading like this. A writer writes something, and a reader reads it. The writer is active, doing all the work. The reader is passive, just absorbing. It's like a pitcher throwing a ball at a wall. The ball hits, bounces off, and that's that. But Adler and Van Doren say this picture is completely backwards. True reading isn't like being a wall at all. It's like being the catcher in a baseball game. The pitcher, that's the author, throws the ball, but the catcher has to be awake, alert, and ready. He needs to anticipate the pitch, adjust his position, move his glove. If he's just standing there half asleep, the ball's going to smack him in the chest or sail right past. The game falls apart. Reading works the same way. An author has thrown a complex idea across time and space, and your job, as the reader, is to be an active catcher. The more active and engaged you are, the better you read. And when you read at the highest level, you're not just collecting more facts. You're gaining something far more precious, genuine understanding. This brings us to a crucial distinction that runs throughout the entire book. The difference between reading for information and reading for understanding. Reading for information is what happens when you browse the news, skim through a magazine, or read a straightforward article. the material is roughly at your level. You're picking up facts, data, stories. Your knowledge grows, sure, but your mind hasn't really been stretched. Think of it as pouring more water into a glass that stays the same size. Reading for understanding is a different beast entirely. This happens when you tackle a book that's genuinely above you, one that challenges your thinking, presents ideas you've never encountered, written by someone who knows more than you do about this particular subject. Here, you're not just adding water to the glass, you're making the glass itself bigger. This kind of reading elevates you. It's the mental equivalent of pulling yourself up by your own bootstraps. You start out understanding less, and through your own effort, with only the book as your guide, you pull yourself up to understanding more. That's the goal. But how do you actually get there? The authors give us a roadmap, a 4-level staircase. Each level builds on the one before it. You can't skip ahead to level 4 without mastering 1, 2, and 3. Level 1 is elementary reading. This is what we all learned in grade school: recognizing words, understanding basic sentences, answering the question, what does this sentence say? If you're listening to this right now, you've got this skill down. But here's the thing that might surprise you. For most people, this is where their reading education stops. They spend the rest of their lives as elementary readers, never realizing there are higher levels waiting to be discovered. But not you, because this is where the real journey begins. Level 2 is inspectional reading, and this is where things get interesting. This is the art of extracting maximum value from a book in a limited amount of time. Before you roll your eyes, this isn't lazy skimming, it's strategic reconnaissance. Think of yourself as a detective arriving at a crime scene. You don't immediately start examining individual dust particles under a microscope. First, you do a quick but systematic sweep to get the layout, to understand what you're dealing with. Inspectional reading has 2 parts. The first is systematic skimming. Before you commit hours of your life to a book, you give it a proper inspection. This should take maybe 15 to 30 minutes. Start with the title and subtitle. These are the author's first clues about what's coming. Then study the table of contents like it's a treasure map, because that's essentially what it is. It's astonishing how many people skip this step entirely. A good author has spent considerable time crafting this outline, showing you the structure of their entire argument. Next, check the index. Look for which terms get referenced the most. Those are what the author considers most important. Flip to a few of those pages. You might land right on the heart of the book. Read the publisher's description on the dust jacket, because often the author wrote it themselves, trying to distill their core message. Look for summary statements at the beginnings or ends of major chapters. And finally, read the first few pages and the last few pages of the book. Authors can rarely resist stating their big idea at the start and summing it up at the end. After this quick process, you'll know what kind of book you're dealing with, what it's about, how it's structured, and whether it deserves a deeper read. You've created a mental map before setting foot on the journey. The second part of inspectional reading is superficial reading, and this is where the authors give you advice that feels almost scandalous. When you tackle a difficult book for the first time, read it all the way through without stopping. Don't stop to look up words you don't know. Don't stop to puzzle over a confusing paragraph. Don't get derailed by a footnote. Just keep moving. Pay attention to what you can understand, and keep your momentum going. Why on earth would they suggest this? Because getting bogged down in the details makes you lose sight of the whole picture. You end up missing the forest because you're staring at individual trees. Most of us learned the exact opposite approach. Look up every word, understand every sentence before moving forward. But that's actually how you get discouraged and give up. By reading through even a challenging book once, grasping maybe only half of it, you gain an understanding of the overall structure. You have context. Then, when you go back for a second, more careful reading, those difficult parts suddenly make much more sense because you know where the author is headed. It's like seeing the picture on a jigsaw puzzle box before you start assembling the pieces. Game changer. So, inspectional reading gives you the lay of the land. But to truly understand a great book, you need to climb to level 3, analytical reading. This is the heart of the book, and the heart of real learning. Analytical reading is a full mental workout. This is where you have that deep, demanding conversation with the author. Your goal is complete mastery of the book. Francis Bacon once said, "Some books are to be tasted, others to be swallowed, and some few to be chewed and digested." Analytical reading is the chewing and digesting. This level breaks down into 3 stages, built around 4 fundamental questions you must ask of any book you want to truly understand. The first stage is about grasping the book's structure, building its skeleton, so to speak. Rule 1. Classify the book. You need to know what kind of book you're reading. History, philosophy, science? Is it theoretical, explaining why something is the way it is? Or practical, teaching you how to do something? You wouldn't read a cookbook the same way you'd read a history of ancient Rome. Knowing the genre sets your expectations and tells you what questions to ask. Rule 2. State the unity of the book. In one sentence, or maybe a short paragraph, what's the main point? If you can't articulate what a book is about in a nutshell, you haven't truly grasped its core. Aristotle did this brilliantly with Homer's Odyssey. He boiled down that entire epic to, basically, a man is away from home, his family's in danger, and after many trials he returns and defeats his enemies. That's the essence. Everything else is detail. Your job is to find that essence. Rule 3. Outline the major parts. A great book is like a well-designed building with many rooms, all connected. You need to see how the author moves from one section of the argument to the next, building the case step by step. This isn't just listing chapter titles. It's understanding the logical flow, how the major parts support the whole structure. Rule 4. Define the problem the author is trying to solve. Every worthwhile book is attempting to answer a question or set of questions. What are they? Why did the author feel compelled to write this? If you can clearly state the author's central questions, you're well on your way to understanding the answers. Once you've built the skeleton, you're ready for the second stage, interpreting the book's content. This is putting flesh on those bones. Rule 5. Come to terms with the author. This might be the most critical step. It's not about finding important words. It's about finding important terms. Here's the difference. A word can have multiple meanings. A term is a word used in one specific, unambiguous way. When an author says liberty, what exactly do they mean? Freedom from government interference? Freedom to achieve one's potential? If you're reading your own meaning into their words, you're not actually communicating. You're talking past each other. Your job is to identify the author's key words and figure out precisely how they're using them. You need to build a shared vocabulary. Until you do, you can't have a real conversation. Rule 6. Grasp the author's leading propositions. A proposition is a statement of knowledge or opinion, the author's answer to a question. You find these in the most important sentences. Your job is to spot these key sentences and understand what they mean. The best test? Put the proposition in your own words. If you can only repeat the author's exact sentence, you've swallowed the words without digesting the thought. Rule 7. Know the author's arguments. Find the sequences of sentences where the author gives reasons for their propositions. An argument is a series of statements leading to a conclusion, the because part. Why should you believe this? The author must give reasons. You need to follow the train of thought, seeing how they move from premises to conclusions. You should be able to put the basic arguments into your own nutshell. Rule 8. Determine which problems the author solved. After finding the questions, terms, propositions, and arguments, you can now ask, did they succeed? Which initial questions did they answer? Did new questions emerge? Did they know which ones remained unsolved? At this point, you've done the hard work of understanding. You've listened patiently and followed every step of the author's thought. Now, and only now, are you ready for the third stage, criticizing the book fairly? And here's something important. Criticism doesn't just mean disagreeing, it means judging. Agreeing is just as much an act of judgment as disagreeing, but there are rules of intellectual etiquette here. Rule 9. You must be able to say, I understand before you say, I agree, I disagree, or I need more time to think. Agreeing without understanding is meaningless. Disagreeing without understanding is arrogant. Don't rush to judgment. The author deserves a fair hearing, and you owe it to yourself to understand a position before accepting or rejecting it. Rule 10. When you disagree, do it reasonably. Don't be argumentative just for the sake of arguing. The goal isn't winning a debate, it's getting closer to the truth. If the author has a good point, admit it. Rule 11. Respect the difference between knowledge and mere opinion. If you disagree, give reasons. It's not enough to say, I don't like these conclusions. You have to show where the author went wrong. This brings us to 4 specific points of criticism. If you disagree, it must be for one of these 4 reasons. First, you can say the author is uninformed. They lack relevant knowledge. For example, Darwin didn't know about genetics when he wrote The Origin of Species, because genetics hadn't been discovered yet. To make this criticism stick, you must state what knowledge was lacking and show why it matters. Second, you can say the author is misinformed. They've asserted something that's actually false. They've made a factual error. You must state the truth and prove their assertion is wrong. Third, you can say the author is illogical. Their reasoning is flawed. The conclusions don't follow from the premises. There's a fallacy in the argument. You must point out the exact logical flaw. Fourth, you can say the author's analysis is incomplete. They haven't solved all the problems they set out to solve, or they haven't seen all the implications of their ideas. This is the most common criticism of even the greatest books, because no work is ever truly complete. If you can't make any of these 4 criticisms, then you're obligated to agree, at least in part. You can't say, I see no flaws, but I still disagree. That's just prejudice, not judgment. These 3 levels, elementary, inspectional, and analytical, form a powerful toolkit. But there's one final, highest level of reading, the most complex and demanding of all. They call it syntopical reading. This is where you read not just one book on a subject, but several, and place them in conversation with one another. Your goal shifts from understanding a single book to understanding an entire subject. You're no longer the student of one master. You become the master of an entire conversation. Imagine you want to understand the concept of love. You gather a reading list of 100 books, from Plato to Freud to modern psychologists. How do you even begin? First, you use inspectional reading to survey your entire bibliography, quickly identifying which books are truly relevant to your specific question. You narrow the field. Second, and this is the trickiest part, you bring the authors to terms. In analytical reading, you work to understand the author's terms. Here you must create your own neutral terminology for the subject. Freud talks about libido. Plato discusses eros. A Christian theologian refers to charity. They're all talking about love, but not in the same language. You must create a set of terms that allows you to translate all their ideas into a common framework. You become the master of the vocabulary. Third, you clarify the questions. You frame neutral questions that all or most of your authors can be interpreted as answering. Does love always involve desire? Is it an emotion or an act of will? Can we love what is not good? The authors may not have explicitly asked these questions, but you must find their answers, even if they're only implied. Fourth, you define the issues. When authors give different answers to the same question, you've got an issue. Your job is to map out these disagreements. Authors A and B say this, while authors C and D say that. You're creating an organized debate where one might not have formally existed. Finally, you analyze the discussion. You don't take sides. Your goal is understanding the whole conversation in all its complexity. The truth about profound subjects is rarely found in one author's answer. It's often discovered in the tension, the dialogue, the creative conflict between different perspectives. You achieve what the authors call dialectical objectivity, presenting the conversation in an ordered way, showing all viewpoints, so that you and others can gain deeper understanding than any single book could provide. Syntopical reading is the ultimate goal. It's where you evolve from learner to genuine participant in the great conversation of ideas. This journey through 4 levels of reading isn't just about technique. It's about fundamentally changing your relationship with books and with your own mind. Adler and Van Doren remind us that, unlike the body, the human mind has no inherent limit to its growth. But it can atrophy without use. Reading for amusement and information are fine. They're like coasting downhill. Reading for understanding is the heavy lifting, the mental exercise that keeps your mind alive, growing, and strong. The books that challenge you are the ones that change you. They make you stretch. And in that stretching, you don't just become a better reader, you become more than you were before. When you step back and look at how to read a book as a whole, you realize it's not really about technique at all. It's about a philosophy of life. In our world of endless notifications, clickbait headlines, and infinite content streams constantly grabbing for our attention, Adler and Van Doren offer something radical: the quiet, focused, deeply rewarding act of genuine understanding. What strikes me most about their message, especially today, is its profound respect for both author and reader. It respects the author enough to say, "I will do the hard work of truly understanding what you've labored to communicate." That's intellectual humility. But it also respects the reader enough to say, "You're not a passive receptacle. You're an equal partner in this conversation. Your mind is capable of judging, questioning, and forming its own conclusions." That's intellectual empowerment. This book is essentially a declaration of war against passive consumption. It insists that knowledge isn't something you download, and understanding isn't something that happens to you. Understanding is something you build, actively, by engaging with the greatest minds that came before us. The rules of reading aren't just a checklist. They're a discipline for developing a free mind. They teach patience, listening before speaking, seeking clarity before judging, and supporting opinions with reason. These aren't just reading skills, they're life skills, the foundation of clear thinking and civil discourse. So how can you start putting these powerful ideas into practice today? Here are a few simple actions. First, pick one challenging book from your shelf, one you've always wanted to read but felt intimidated by. This week, don't try to read it yet. Just give it an inspectional reading. Spend 30 minutes with it. Read the title, table of contents, index, the beginning and end. Get the lay of the land. That's it. You'll be amazed at how much more approachable the book becomes. Second, for the next few days, as you read anything, an article, a book chapter, even a long email, consciously ask yourself the 4 main questions. What is this about as a whole? What is being said in detail, and how? Is it true? And what of it? Just asking these questions will transform you from passive to active reader. Third, grab a pencil and start writing in your books. Underline passages that resonate, scribble questions in the margins, argue with the author, make the book your own. A marked-up book is a book that's been loved, wrestled with, and understood. That was the summary of How to Read a Book by Mortimer J. Adler and Charles Van Doren. We've explored the main pathways today, but I'll be honest with you. A summary is like a map of a beautiful country. It can show you landmarks and main roads, but it can never replace actually walking the trails, breathing the air, and feeling the sun on your face. The real magic of this book, and any great book, happens in those quiet moments of your own reading, when a particular idea connects with your own experience in a way you never expected. This summary is here to help you decide if this journey is one you want to take. If anything we've talked about today sparks something in you, I encourage you to pick up a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning a new skill. It's about beginning a lifelong adventure of mental and spiritual growth. The link is in the description. Also, if you found this summary valuable, please click that like button and subscribe to our channel. It helps us reach more people who, like you, are on a growth journey. We have many more explorations of life-changing books coming your way. Let's keep learning and growing together.